What if the Soviet Union had won the Cold War? For decades, the world was told that the Cold War ended with one clear winner. The Soviet Union collapsed, the West celebrated, and history seemed to move in one direction. But what if it had gone the other way? What if the Soviet Union had not fallen, and instead had outlasted the United States? At first, that might sound like just another political shift, another flag, another superpower, another set of speeches. But the truth is much darker than that. Because if the Soviet Union had won the Cold War, the world would not simply be more communist. It would be more controlled, more divided, and possibly more dangerous than anything we know today. The Cold War was never really cold. It was a struggle for survival, influence, and the future of the entire planet. Nuclear weapons were already waiting in the background. Propaganda was already shaping minds. Intelligence agencies were already fighting invisible wars. The only thing holding everything together was the balance between two powers that feared each other too much to move too far. Now, imagine that balance breaking the other way. In this timeline, the Soviet Union does not collapse. Instead, it adapts. It survives its economic problems, tightens control, and slowly expands its influence while the United States begins to weaken. At first, the change is subtle. A few victories in foreign policy, a few economic advantages, a few political mistakes on the American side. Then, little by little, the Soviet bloc becomes stronger while the West starts to fracture. And once that begins, it becomes very hard to stop. The first shock would be Europe. NATO would face a completely different reality. If the Soviet Union had won, Eastern Europe would not be remembered as a former sphere of influence. It would become the center of a new global order. More countries would be forced into tighter alignment with Moscow. Borders would harden. Governments would be pressured, and the idea of a free, unified Europe might never fully exist. But that is only the beginning. Because the real battle would not just be military, it would be ideological. The Soviet Union understood something powerful. If you control the story, you control the future. In a world where Moscow wins, media, education, research, and culture would all be reshaped to protect the system. Dissent would not just be criticized, it would be erased. Opposition would not just be pushed aside, it would disappear. And that creates a strange kind of peace. Not peace through freedom, peace through fear. At first, some people might even believe that Soviet victory would bring stability. After all, no more arms race, no more proxy wars, no more constant fear of nuclear annihilation. But that feeling would not last long. Because when one superpower wins completely, it does not stop history. It absorbs it. The United States would not vanish overnight, but its role in the world would collapse. Its allies would start to drift. Its economy would come under pressure. Its influence in Asia, Africa, and Latin America would shrink. And the image of America as the symbol of freedom would become a memory rather than a reality. That is where the twist gets worse, because in a world where the Soviet Union wins, the question is not just who rules, it is what kind of world survives after the victory. Would technology still advance? Yes, but differently. Would space exploration continue? Probably, but as a tool of prestige and power. Would people still have access to the internet, open information, and global communication? Maybe not in the way we know it. Every new invention would be filtered through state control. Every breakthrough would be measured by whether it strengthens the system. The result would not be a futuristic utopia. It would be a colder, more managed civilization. And for ordinary people, that would matter more than any grand speech from a leader in Moscow. It would shape what they can read, what they can say, where they can travel, and what they are allowed to believe. The world would still have progress, but it would feel heavier, slower, more watched. Still, There is one more question that makes this alternate history so unsettling. What happens when the winning side becomes too powerful? Because history has a pattern. Every empire believes it can control the future forever. Every system believes it has solved the problem of human conflict. But eventually, pressure builds. People resist. Economies crack. Loyalty weakens. And the same machine that once looked unstoppable starts to freeze from the inside. So even if the Soviet Union had won the Cold War, that victory might not have lasted forever. It could have created a giant superstate, but one held together by surveillance, force, and constant fear of collapse. A world order like that may look stable from the outside, but inside it would always be vulnerable. That is the real horror of this scenario. Not just that the Soviet Union wins, but that the victory may come with a price so high that the entire world becomes less free, less open, and less human. So when we ask what if the Soviet Union had won the Cold War, the answer is not just a different flag on the map. It is a world where the balance of power shifts, freedom shrinks, and every nation must live under the shadow of one dominant system. A world where the war never really ended. It just changed shape.